Hola, it's Joe Pardavila, and you are listening to the Forbes Books podcast. And you know, we're always looking for the best ROI, but sometimes we just take things for granted. For example, tech. Are all entrepreneurs maximizing their technology investments? Well, my guest this week has unlocked the way to create and show the value of technological initiatives while transforming businesses. His name is Ben DeBow. He's an architect of global mission-critical enterprise data platforms and the founder of Fortified. Ben, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me.
You're very welcome. So I'm super excited to talk to you about everything you're working on. You've got a book in the works with Forbes Books, and I was curious about the start. How does one get into this field? Because you're in this very hyper-specific technology field. Is this something that you were born to do, stumbled upon? How did it all happen?
Well, it's interesting. I always say there's a lot that happens over time with luck. And, I was, focusing on the financial aspects within university, and I stumbled into technology. And that one's, unique job opportunity that came to me a long time ago, about 25 years ago, ended up changing the course of my direction. And ever since then, I've been very passionate about data, and it's sort of changed my life. And I've been able to help a lot of people and organizations around data now.
Data. Let's get into this because most people probably before 2016 had no idea, had any conversations about data. Then all of a sudden, you hear about the Cambridge Analytica story. You hear what Facebook and big tech are doing with data. When did you realize how fraught data was and how people were really taking it for granted that people were taking care of their data when many were not?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because when I first started technology, some of the first systems that came online around computers were accounting systems, right? So my other degrees in financial, and within the business, people focused on data, but it's mostly financial data. What was interesting is, relative to your point, is all the different other use cases around data. Whether it's political uses, solving different, medical problems, and or else, helping, cars drive better these days. And as I always say, every organization's a potential client for us because every organization has data. And without data, you wouldn't need any other technology devices today. So it's very powerful what you can do with data, both on the positive and potentially the negative as well.
When you have these conversations, I'm curious, when you go to parties and you have, when people used to do that sort of thing, and you meet with people, it's funny, I have a couple of friends I know that are involved in supply chain. And up until 2021, when they went to a party and said they're in supply chain, people were like, yeah, okay, I don't know what that means. I don't care. Now, when they go to parties, they don't tell people they're in supply chain because they'll get all these questions from folks trying to figure out, where's my packages? Why can't I get this? And everything like that. Have you had that similar thing with folks who are very sensitive to all of these stories about data leaks and sort of all the ransomware and all these hackers that are taking advantage of undefensible people?
It's interesting when I think about what people are usually exposed to, like, Marriott just suffered another data breach. I just saw that right before us, having our conversation today. Most people are not really as familiar, even when you have that in headlines, as far as, what the potential risk is around data leaks and the hacking events. But what's interesting is, with those clients or else people at the party, they know that their data is going everywhere. And what they usually end up talking about, and it's an interesting one, is how Facebook is listening and using the surfing data or even the voice data to help recommend products or the advertisements. So they're, I think, being more exposed and more aware on the social element and or else the advertising element.
When it comes to what you do, talk to me about how you deal in the data space, because from what I understand, your big thing is getting your return on investment on your technologies, right? Because I feel many people write a check and then they're like, okay, cool, I'm done, whether it's cybersecurity, data management, but it's getting the best value from your technology. That's sort of like the space that you've really zeroed in on.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I first started in technology, one of the first projects I did was designing a data warehouse, which was the early version of data analytical systems back in the late 90s. And that was focused on analyzing business data to help the business make decisions. Okay. Probably 10 years later on, my career took a turn where I leveraged my infrastructure knowledge, my data expertise, and helped clients around the world design and build these platforms that run those business systems. Now, one thing that's changed over that time is I've applied that same, I call it data analytical background, not to business data, but to the technology data that drives the systems that drive the business applications. And one of the challenges is many organizations now have so much data about their own systems, and there's all these great tools and technologies out there, but there's also still some gaps. And those gaps are some of the things that I'm helping bring awareness around efficiency, capacity, financial transparency, and realistically ROI, or what's the value of my technology investment. Because you made an interesting comment. When people write a check for a technology project and they decide to fund it, right? There's usually a business case, right? And then they go write that check. They go hire a project team, buy a whole bunch of hardware. At the end of the project, if the project was on budget or under budget, on time, etc., they think it's a success. But how do you know what the true value of that technology is to the business, right? And actually have it measured through some other, technology and potential KPIs, right? So that's where I've been focusing on, is helping clients use the data that is focused on the technology systems that run the business, and helping clients understand the value of their technology investments, and realistically also the efficiency as well.
It almost sounds like you're the hall monitor of the technology that companies have invested on, right? You're keeping an eye to make sure that it's all working and there is that return on investment on there.
Well, what's interesting is that there's an immense amount of potential cost savings, resource savings sitting at companies' fingertips today that they are not aware of. And I'm talking billions of dollars, because organizations invest a large amount in technologies, both hardware and software. But when you think about the software, a lot of times they're evaluating that based upon the business criteria. Does it meet my requirements, right? But they don't ask that other question of how efficient is that application? How much is it going to cost over the 5 or 10 years that I might have that installed within my organization, right? And those are some of the unique data points that, if I ask the right questions up front, I might change what I buy. And it's sort of like buying the difference between buying a Hummer, which gets 8 miles per gallon, and a Prius that might get 40 miles per gallon. The total cost of ownership over the 5 years, especially around gas mileage and so forth, is going to be a lot different. But they both get you from A to B.
Does having a sort of highly influential, high-impact CTO play a big part in this? Because for many years, the CTO was back in the office, and they would only pop it into the CEO or C-suite or board meetings when something bad happened, or they needed to make some sort of infrastructure update. Now you're seeing more CTOs have a seat at the table. Is that the kind of person that you feel has the most impact on a company, because they can connect with someone like you to find and fill those gaps?
Yeah, I think now is different and more valuable for the CTO depending on where they've been and so forth, and where the organization is. And what I mean by that is the organization will go through different maturity life cycles, right? If that organization views technology as a cost center, and it just runs your email and it runs the file servers and it happens to host some applications, right? That CTO is probably, reporting up to the CFO and doesn't have that big of a say. But organizations that have been through this digital transformation, which is a very important topic these days, and now IT or technology is viewed as an enabler, right? That's where that CTO actually starts to have those conversations with the other business leaders more as a peer, because he's enabling those business units and business leaders to accomplish their goals because they know how valuable technology is. And there's even a phase beyond that where the business, once they've viewed technology as an enabler, there's actually another phase beyond that. And that's where the business changes from being maybe a consumer packaging company. But what they've done is they've invested a large amount in technology. And now that technology's bringing in more revenue than the consumer packaging. What that company just did, they just turned into a technology company. And that's where that CTO becomes even more important to that organization because he's driving new lines of business versus supporting them.
And are you seeing this shift where a lot of companies are more, I guess, attracted or it's more important to them to have that kind of CTO that wants to have a seat at the table as opposed to, no offense, but like the project manager type CTO that wants to just check the boxes?
Well, it goes back down to, there's different people for different roles within society, right? There's the transformational CIOs that get brought in to help transform. There's the maintain CIOs, which are brought in to just maintain status quo, right? And then there's the visionary, right? So I think, when I come in, and one of the organizations we've been working with in New York, it's a big hedge fund, right? There's a CTO there. He had the vision. He enabled everybody at the table. And over 8 years, executed on that vision. And it was very, very interesting to see because they actually went through 2 different phases, right? And it was interesting to see how the business viewed that CTO and then how they view him now, right? And it's those organizations that we love working with because we love to help solve complex problems, but also enable organizations to succeed at the same time.
And how is your sort of CTO, CIO radar when you walk in a room? Can you tell that they're that transformative, innovative, rule-breaking kind of executive?
Yeah, I have to read people very often because we get called into different organizations a lot of times in crisis, but also sometimes on the planning, right? And when we get called in on either of those, you could start to look at the team dynamics, organizational structures, what are the technology initiatives and goals, how efficient and agile are those organizations, how do they measure success through different KPIs and so forth. We're looking at all those different things to understand what type of business are we dealing with and what type of leader do we have leading that organization.
And what happens, just, feel free to share when you run into that CTO that doesn't have that vision. Or is it something where you're like, I don't know if I can make this work if this person just doesn't see past his nose kind of thing. How do you deal with that kind of situation?
Those are challenging because it's teaching a old dog new tricks. But I always say, if it's not the front door, it could be the back door, and ask for forgiveness versus permission, depending on which type of situation you're in. And when we're at an organization, I also like to have us focus on the outcome versus the task to accomplish that project. Let us be the leaders there and the experts and just deliver on a service or deliver on a result. So when we were working with those type of organizations or those business leaders, it's delivering what they want us to deliver, but maybe you also add and go 2 steps further because a lot of times people do not know what is possible and or else do not know what to ask for. Because that's the difference also potentially between a CIO that got put in a position that they're not as comfortable with, but they're probably highly skilled in many other areas. So if you can help not only deliver what they expected, but maybe give them a little bit more, or also have those visionary conversations with them to say what is possible, that's where potentially they see what is possible and they help, align the organization and greenlight some of those initiatives.
All right, so let's talk about the part you play, because what is your value proposition when it comes to these organizations? Are they calling you for preventative measures? Are they calling you after disaster? Where does Ben DeBow fit?
Well, it's interesting. I just got back from Europe, and a lot of times these days it's preventative, but we still get called in for disasters. And One of the organizations I've been working with over 20 years, I was literally on top of a 7,000 foot mountain peak, just hiked up it actually. And I got a text message from this organization, said, "Hey, we're in crisis. We cannot bill our clients for the last 20 some days. We migrated to a certain cloud provider and everything went sideways," right? So we get called in to solve those types of problems. And unfortunately, it is a bad situation, but I used to be a firefighter, so I love running towards fires versus away. So I grasp those opportunities because those are also the opportunities where they need our expertise and experience, but they also need a lot of times just organization. Because one of the things that I commonly see within very large organizations, everybody has their job, everybody has their skill set. And there's very few people that bridge all those different areas of expertise and can be a natural leader to help people understand what are the first, second, and third things that need to be done that will make the biggest difference in that crisis, right? Versus just changing stuff. So that's really the role that I play and our team plays within a crisis, is bringing that level of expertise and experience to the table and taking that leadership role within that crisis to help move that, I call it action plan, define and move that action plan forward to bring stability and calm back to that client.
And just talking to entrepreneurs over the last couple of years since 2020, I've noticed that they are embracing this sort of like preventative mindset. They don't want to be calling Ben DeBow, who's mountain climbing in the middle of nowhere. They want to have all these players in place. Right. Are you seeing that more often than not?
I think for the smart organizations that do align themselves with industry experts, right? Because here's one thing that does occur within organizations. You have the kingdom builders, right? They're building great teams. But if you have a team that has been supporting the same solutions for 10 years, they might not know what's out there and they might not have that diversity. That's where they're sometimes not always aligning with the outside experts to be able to help them when that crisis occurs. Other organizations understand that their team is great for supporting the business 95% of the time. But that other 5% of the time, I want to be able to have a great team around me. It's the medical professionals. It's the trainers and everybody else that you might have around you, Joe, to be able to help support you in your life, right? One phone call away. And it's those organizations that we like to create relationships with. And that's part of the reason why we started a managed services company, to be one phone call away when those clients need us.
When you get those phone calls, going back to your mountain climb, how quickly are you able to solve the problem? I don't know if you could give an example, but I'm curious because a lot of times when you talk about crisis, that one company you talk about was 12 days they weren't able to pay. When companies can't pay, get paid for 12 days, bad things happen. How quickly can you move on something like that?
I'll give you two examples. The example we just talked about, I said, well, hold on, I'm going to hike down the mountain. I gave him a WebEx on my phone while sitting on a boat, sent him a piece of code, looked at the data, and this is because I'm very good and expert within a certain technology. And I said, here, and here are your issues. So that was, a couple hours later after hiking down the mountain. Another scenario was a client was down for 5 days because they did a big refactoring project, basically slightly redesigning part of their application, credit card processing, 5 days. One of the persons there I'd worked with before, they finally called me. 1 hour later, they were up and running.
Wow. 1 hour? You can't even get a pizza in an hour. How'd you do that in an hour?
And it goes back down to knowing what to look at and understanding what the real problem is. And then this is the hardest thing across technology and realistic, probably another fields, but I'll speak for technology, is you have all this data. You have all these levers. Like when you're in the audio studio and I look at all those little knobs that you guys have in your recording studios, I get overwhelmed. Same thing in technology. Most people get overwhelmed. For me and our team, we've been through enough of those experiences so that we're able to make sure that we're finding the root cause. And then this is the most important thing. What are the one or two actions that we could take right now that will address the root cause. So when that credit card processing system was offline, is actually that same piece of code we sent this last client as well. I saw a certain type of event happen in that code. I said, why is this going on? And it said, well, we did this and this. I said, that's not good. I said, this is your problem. Let's do one of these two things. They made that change. Things started flowing.
I mean, it's hard to believe. I know technology moves fast and we expect things done, yesterday. How were you able to build a company like this that could move so fast and so agile? I mean, you hear the word agile and flexible over the last couple of years, but was this sort of like the mindset from the beginning when you built your company Fortified, that it was like, hey, the only way we succeed is if we move at light speed?
I think it was slightly different from speed being the objective, is more access to great talent. So one of the decisions we made prior to COVID, we hired the best people that we knew wherever they live. So we have people in Seattle or Upper Peninsula, Michigan. We used to have a guy live 1 mile north of the Mexican border and cross the border at lunch to get tacos. Lived in an RV, right? But it's having access to the knowledge and expertise. And this remote model makes it possible for us to bring this great talent to anybody.
So you've been remote long before it was cool?
Yes. People said, how did you do this? And I said, well, I wouldn't be able to have half the people on my team right now. And now what we want to be able to do is help clients wherever. And it's worked out very, very well. That's also another problem that I want to try to solve, because so many people are focused on, how do I manage my remote team? How do I know that Joe is delivering value to my organizations? And most organizations will focus on the number of tasks done and mean time to response and so forth, right? That just means people are pushing and managing task-based stuff. I actually, want to solve or help solve the value-based problem, which is, how much value is my remote employees bringing my organization, and how do I measure that fundamentally across technology? And those are some of the other cool things that we're working on within Fortified, is to help solve some of these other problems that are going to help organizations in many more ways long term.
When did you realize the importance of not worrying about looking over someone's shoulder and seeing if they got their work done? If they're in the office for 8 hours, they went through their task management application and checked off everything they had to get done. When did you realize that that's not how you wanted to run a company and that was not important to you?
It's based upon my DNA, I think, just because I saw problems wherever. And then when we first started hiring individuals, we hired some solid engineers that sort of had that same mindset, which really has helped us build that initial foundation and that initial culture that has then been adopted by our team as it grows. So I like to say, it was me, but it was actually me and the initial employees. We just saw and identified this as a great way to help organizations. But at the same time, is one of our core values is results driven, right? Let's focus on results, because that's also what organizations pay for. They don't really pay for, and actually many do pay for just tasks, right? But at the end of the day, they really want results. So that's what we have as a core value, but that's also what we sell to organizations too, is results.
Wow. It's funny because when I spoke to a lot of entrepreneurs and mostly CEOs during the pandemic, one of the things I heard was, man, I was so surprised that our team was able to work at such a high level on remote. I thought everyone had to be in the same office to get all their work done. I couldn't believe that. And every time they said that, I would think to myself, well, if you didn't trust your employees, why would you keep them as employees? Have you noticed that shift in mindset from a lot of leaders? Because obviously you have to work with a lot of these companies to make them set up so they're able to work very cleanly in a remote fashion. What was your reaction when you ran into folks like that who were like, man, I can't believe we could actually trust human beings. This is a weird thing to do.
I always say it takes a crisis to change people and times, right? And I actually think that COVID, there was a lot of positives. And one of those positives was, challenging the concept of being in an office, 9 to 5, et cetera, right? And I think that opened a lot of people to many other valuable lessons over the years as well, around family and business and the personal health. But not being in an office, it's great seeing that other organizations are adapting that. It's also scary too, because now we're competing with those organizations on the same great talent. So it's a double-edged sword as well.
Right, yeah. And when you became a leader, were you ready to be a leader? Because that's one of the things, like people who decide to run companies, it's one thing to own a company and run it, but then it's like that leadership part. Did you have to do a lot of sort of self-analysis or work on yourself to prepare you to be a leader? Because just talking to you for like 20, 30 minutes, I feel like you keep your team members, you think about what your team members are feeling, you care about how they do their job. You don't necessarily care what they're doing between those 8 hours a day as long as they get their results done. But did you have to get to a place to be that comfortable with people, or was it something that you had to work on?
I'm sort of atypical on the technology side just because I am very geek, but at the same time I've also been a people person, right? So part of my background is I've been building relationships with people for the last many, many years and been involved in so many different groups and organizations. I think that's helped me be a natural leader just because of, enabling others to accomplish different things, having solid relationships with the different individuals, right? It doesn't mean I haven't had to push myself to gain a lot more knowledge and experience through others. I'm part of different entrepreneur groups as well. So a lot of the peers that I speak with and share experiences with also helps me grow. And I always say the best way to learn something is go fix it after someone's broke it, and or else go just do it, right? So, part of being a leader is just go and be a leader and then adapt and try to learn and have other people, great people around you tell you what are things that you could do better. And that's really helped as well as having a solid team give me feedback so then I can grow and vice versa.
What's the best piece of advice you've ever gotten, whether it's from your team members or just another colleague or maybe even competitor in the field?
It's interesting. There's many different things that come to my mind, but and this is an odd one. But I was standing in a bar talking to this one individual. He's another business owner, and he's very accomplished. And it was interesting because he turned to me and said, like, "Hey Ben, what are your goals?" And I said, "Well, actually, I really don't have any. I just go keep on accomplishing and accomplishing and accomplishing." He's like, "Well, that's good, but think about where you would be if you actually had goals." I said, "Good point," because I never thought of it that way, right? Because as a person that just goes and gets things done, I'm a constantly accomplishing, climbing that next mountain, right? So right when you get done with the mountain, what do? Where do I want to climb next, right? But it does go back. Where am I climbing to? Where's my journey going to? And I think that was a very valuable lesson where I changed my outlook a little bit to help me say, where are we going? What are we going to try to accomplish? And I think that's made a big difference in my outlook as well.
And lastly, you're in the middle of writing a book for Forbes Books, and I always like to ask this question for authors that are writing maybe their first or second books. Why a book? Why was it important for you to write this?
It's sort of aligned with my other passion. So over the last many, many years, there's different things that I wanted to solve within technology. And I was like, well, how will I do that? And 2 years, literally in February, right before COVID, I flew to Israel and I greenlighted a software product. And that software product is sort of an embodiment of a lot of knowledge and expertise that me and my team have built up over time. But part of those goals that we set for the software and the stories that the software is going to solve, there's a lot more to be told other than just technology. And that's where the other thing on my list is sharing my experiences, knowledge, and expertise with the world, and helping others, understand some opportunities that they have in front of them if you just look at things differently, just like how I look at goals differently today. It changed my outlook. It changed what I do by asking different questions. And I think that's the goal of the book, is to have people read it and ask just a couple of different questions when they're making those technology decisions within a business.
His name is Ben DeBow. Looking forward to the book and looking forward to what you do next with Fortified. It sounds like you're constantly moving, right? It's a very kinetic company. You're always on the move looking to see what's next, right?
Yes. Yeah. Well, that's the goal of my COO and others, to try to put a seatbelt around me so I stay in the plane and don't jump out and then pull my parachute and land somewhere else and go do something else and hop another plane. So yeah, it is very dynamic, but keep life exciting, right?
Absolutely. Ben, thanks very much for the time. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You're very welcome. And that's it for this episode of the Forbes Books Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you take a quick second to subscribe so you automatically get new shows when they drop. Also, if you have a minute, I would love if you left us a review so more amazing entrepreneurs like yourself can discover the show. And please don't forget the golden rule and treat others as you want to be treated. Thanks for listening. Until next time, adios.